In Japan, there's a haunted forest called Aokigahara, also known as the Suicide Forest. Located at the base of Mount Fuji, this dense forest is infamous for the many people who go there to end their lives. One dark night, a man named Kenji decided to enter the forest, hoping to understand why so many were drawn to its eerie depths. As he walked deeper, the forest grew unnaturally quiet. No birds chirped, and no wind rustled the leaves. The silence was so heavy, it felt like a presence, watching, waiting. Kenji started to feel uneasy. He could almost hear whispers, though there was no one around. Shadows moved just out of sight, flickering between the trees. The deeper he went, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. His flashlight began to flicker, and soon it went out completely. In the pitch black, Kenji heard soft footsteps behind him. When he turned around, he saw nothing but darkness. Panic gripped him as he quickened his pace, trying to find his way back. The footsteps grew louder, and he could feel a cold breath on the back of his neck. Suddenly, a pale figure emerged from the shadows. A ghostly woman with long, tangled hair and empty, hollow eyes. She reached out for Kenji, her fingers like ice. Terrified, he ran, not looking back, until he finally stumbled out of the forest, gasping for breath. To this day, Kenji swears that the spirits of Aokigahara tried to claim him, just like so many others who entered the haunted forest and never returned.
Whatever you do, don't play with tarot. Why? Well, let me just tell you about what happened to a friend of mine. She was at a party. It was like 5 or 6 people. It was even a friend's birthday, but they had run out of drinks. So they decided to take a look around the house. Now, let me just tell you, tarot have a very specific set of rules that you have to follow if you play. Number 1, never use a deck without cleansing. Number 2, never play alone. And number 3, the most imperative rule, never use someone else's deck. They found a tarot deck in the basement and they used it when it wasn't theirs. They decided to do some tarot readings. At first, everything seemed fine. One of them would receive money. One of them would suffer a crushing blow. One of them would have trouble in their love life. They laughed about it and moved on until the next night. Once they had all gone their separate ways, one of the girls was home alone and heard some shuffling. But when she went to go see what it was, the ladder to the attic was down. She thought that was weird, you know, maybe her friends were playing a prank on her or something. So she went up into the attic to check it out. But the next morning, she was found dead. The next night, another one of them passed, and that's when my friend realized this is a pattern. Now, they didn't know anything about the supernatural. After doing some research, they realized that they were not the only ones that this had happened to. 5 teens dead after using what looks to be the same tarot deck. They needed help from a professional, so they decided to go see a psychic. But when they got there, they started to get a weird feeling. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. Going to a stranger's house, alone in the woods, with nothing to protect yourself? They decided to knock anyways.
True and terrifying story about a woman named Hachishaku-sama, or 8 feet tall. In a rural village in Japan, there was a family with a young boy who lived happily. One summer, the boy visited his grandparents' house. One day, while playing in the yard, he saw a tall, strange woman standing by the fence. She was impossibly tall, nearly 8 feet, and wore a long white dress. Her face was hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. The boy's grandparents looked terrified when he described the woman. They told him that she was Hachishaku-sama, a ghostly figure who preys on children. Once she sets her eyes on a child, she follows them relentlessly, making a deep, eerie sound like po, po, po. The grandparents took the boy inside and performed various protective rituals. They locked all the doors and windows, placed bowls of salt in each corner of the room, and told the boy not to leave his room until morning. That night, he heard the haunting po, po, po sound coming closer and closer, but he stayed hidden. In the morning, the grandparents hurriedly took him to a distant relative's house, hoping to break Hachishaku-sama's curse by getting him far away from the village. For many years, the boy was not allowed to visit his grandparents' village, and his family never spoke of the incident again. The legend of Hachishaku-sama remains a chilling reminder of a ghostly figure that can appear anywhere, always seeking out children to take away forever.
I told my older brother to fix the water heater before I took my nap. I woke up to the sounds of screaming and rushing water. When I went to check it out, I met my brother in the hallway. His skin was boiled and blistered, his eyes were sunken and bloodshot, and his lips were gone.
This is what they meant when they said, "Don't talk to strangers." In the early 1900s, a 10-year-old boy was playing in the woods when a tall man appeared and asked if he wanted to come back to his cabin for dinner. Totally caught off guard, the boy reluctantly agrees and begins walking. When they get to the cabin, the boy is relieved when he sees Paul, a family friend, sitting on the porch, so the boy happily goes inside. After they eat, the boy says thank you to the strange tall man, says bye to Paul, and then he leaves. He had only walked a few steps when he sees his family, along with Paul, running up the path towards him, frantically asking if he was okay. Confused, the boy says, "I'm just fine," and he looks at Paul and he's like, "Why didn't you tell them I was with you at the cabin?" And he points over his shoulder. Paul glances over the boy's shoulder and then narrows his eyes and says, "You were kidnapped by a cult 3 days ago. No one's seen you." Terrified, the boy turns around to look at the cabin he just came from, and it's gone. All he sees is a dark forest that stretches for miles.
Telling you a scary story using this filter. The bitter wind blows as Edward has a shit. He wipes his ass with a fork and pulls up his Hinge account. Edward hasn't felt the touch of a woman since the Iraq War. He swipes and swipes through Hinge, desperate to find his left testicle. He lost it in the Iraq War. As Edward searches for his left testicle, suddenly there's an enormous fork. Edward turns to see the woman from Iraq. "Paul? Is it really you?" "Yes," says Paul. "I've searched everywhere for your right testicle, and you have it, so give it to me now!" Edward screams, sillily. No. Edward grabs his trusty poo fork from his pillowcase, bad place to put that, and throws it at Paul. The poo fork hurtles across the room, impaling her directly in the right testicle. Revenge. A victorious Edward laughs uncontrollably. He opens his Hinge back up and sends unsolicited dick. The end.
On a lazy Friday night when I had the house to myself, I was chilling in the living room with the lights off, watching movie after movie. It was past like 10, and I had a craving for pizza, so I ordered a pie from the local late-night pizza place. It was a rainy night, part of the reason why I chose to just stay in and watch movies. Ironically, I was watching some scary movie at the moment, and at some point during that I heard loud steps coming up the front stoop outside. I waited for a knock or the doorbell, but when I didn't hear either, I muted the TV out of curiosity. I then went to the front door and quietly lifted the slider above the peephole to look out at who could be on the porch. I was expecting to see the pizza guy, but at first all I thought I saw was black. It took me a few moments to realize I was looking back at someone's eye, pressed up on the other side of the peephole. I basically leaped back from being startled. I called through the door asking if it was the pizza guy. A deep man's voice called back, "Yes, it is." But something wasn't right. I looked through the peephole again, and now it seemed like the man on the other side was covering it with his hand or something. I didn't know what to do, other than yell, "Why are you covering the peephole?" He didn't respond to that. Instead, he just knocked on the door. I yelled at him to please leave, and I walked away from the door back to the living room. A few moments later, the doorbell rang, and I heard the same deep voice yell, "Pizza, open up." I once again got up and went to check through the peephole, but he was still covering it. I shouted at him again to please leave or I'd be calling the police. Now I turned off the TV to allow for total darkness in the house. All I could hear for a while was the sound of the pouring rain outside. When I went back to the front door to look through the peephole once again, now I was able to see through it. The man was no longer on the stoop. I called the pizza place and asked the guy who picked up the phone if he could check if the delivery driver had arrived to my house yet. I of course explained what was going on and why I was asking for that. He said he'd give the driver a call and then call me back. So I hung up and waited like 2 minutes. And the guy called me back to tell me that the driver had not yet arrived to my house, and he suggested that I call the police. He also said the driver would call me when he arrives. I thanked him and hung up the phone. Next thing I remember is hearing knocks from the backyard door. I felt like this couldn't be happening. I actually felt sick. I crept to the back door, which has a pull-down blind which covers the glass for privacy, and was currently pulled down. This next part I still don't understand. Even though I crept quietly to the back door, as soon as I got there, that same familiar voice said, "I see you there, open the door." Then he tried opening it himself, but thank God it was locked. Once again, I yelled on calling the cops if he didn't leave. By luck of good timing, my phone began to ring, and it was the real pizza guy calling to say he was here. I told him to please come to the front door quickly. I opened the front door for him and let him in. He asked if I needed help, and I begged him to stay with me until the police would show up. And he did me that favor. Police showed up within 10 minutes. Having someone there waiting with me made me feel a lot better. There weren't any other disturbances from that man outside from the time the pizza guy got there to the time the police left. I went straight to sleep after that. I went so far as to pushing my dresser in front of my door, just as a desperate act of feeling safe. Thank God that man left for good.
I almost died from using a Ouija board. This is the look I'm gonna do while I tell you about it. So I'm gonna start at the beginning. Me and my friend were at Toys R Us and we saw a Ouija board. We were probably like 15 at the time. And at this point in time, I was living in a haunted house. And we were looking for something to play that night at a little party. I'm pretty sure the reason we chose the Ouija board was because our crushes were coming over or something. And we decided it was the perfect time to get a Ouija board. So we headed over to my haunted house. All of our friends came over and I don't think I told my dad that we bought a Ouija board because we all went into the bathroom to use the Ouija board. Like, I think we were hiding it. So we take out the Ouija board and we read the rules. Rule number 1, never play alone. Rule number 2, never play in a cemetery. Rule number 3, never play intoxicated. And rule number 4, always say goodbye. We sit down and we all put our hands on the board. We move it in a figure 8 and we say, "Friendly spirits, are you here? Friendly spirits, are you near?" I'm done with this look, so you'll have to go to part 2.
This happened when my niece was around 18 or 19. She was living in a city about an hour away to go to college and was also working at a restaurant. That night, my husband, baby daughter and I had travelled to the city and eaten at that restaurant where we saw my niece. We said goodbye to her, we left and we went back to our much smaller city. And instead of going back home, we decided to play cards at another couple's house close by. We stay well past our daughter falling asleep and we didn't make it back to our house until 3 a.m. We get inside and our answering machine is loaded with messages. First, my niece asking if I'm okay and to please call her, followed by several more with increasing urgency. Then we got a message from Kentucky State Police saying an officer was at my door to do a wellness check. We don't even have time to start calling anyone back before the police have returned and they're knocking on our door. They tell me my niece contacted police in her city and said she received a phone call that led her to believe that I'd been in a terrible accident and needed assistance. The police had gone into her town and gone to the location my niece was at, but they could see nothing. She led them to a field that led up to some woods. They wouldn't search the woods for her though, because they said that their heat sensors were not indicating that there was any wreckage there. They leave and they contact the police in my town. So now the police have finally located me hours later and they call her right in front of me to let her know I'm alive, and I hear her cry out in relief through the phone. Case closed, cops peace out. But what had made my niece react in this way? her phone call. She's home from work and she's lying in bed with her girlfriend about to fall asleep. She had a cell phone and it rang. No number, so she ignored it. Then she realised she could count on one hand the number of people who had that number.
Yeah.
She'd only got on that phone a week, so she did answer. Nothing. Nobody said anything. She repeated her hellos, then said, "Look, I can't hear anything, I'm hanging up." Then she heard someone try to speak, but she couldn't make it out. She repeated, "I can't hear you." The voice tried harder, but it seemed to have trouble, like they were gurgling on something. My niece got a terrible sense that it was blood and handed the phone to her girlfriend, who was in the military and better trained for someone who may have a medical emergency. The girlfriend asked the person on the phone if they could switch to pushing buttons and yes or no questions. The person on the phone obliges. They establish that yes, there has been an accident, and yes, they need help. The girlfriend is trying to get a location, but this yes-no stuff isn't getting it done. The voice starts trying to talk again, this time stronger. It's still low and laboured, but they can tell they're talking to a female and she is pinned underneath something. Through her faint speech and switching to tones anytime they could, they learn she was in a vehicle with a man and a baby. She can't tell where she is because she's trapped and it's dark. My niece's girlfriend asks the woman to start naming everything she passed before she wrecked, every landmark. My niece is flipping out and is certain it's me and we just never made it home. I just happen to be one of the few people with her phone number. So they jump in the Jeep and they start searching for these landmarks. The woman ends up leading them to a field just outside of town. Things start feeling eerie to my niece and her girlfriend. They're no longer in the lights of the town, it's dark and something feels off. They're approaching a curve and the lady on the phone says, "I see lights." As they turn the curve, she says, "They're gone." The girlfriend stops the Jeep and reverses. The woman says, on the phone, "They're back. Is that you? Please come help me." Still feeling off, the girlfriend looks at my niece, headlights pointing straight into an empty field that ends in a tree line, and she shuts off the lights. As soon as they did, the voice says, "No, come back, please help me. I'm stuck." They turn the lights back on and start slowly driving off-road into the field. They're telling her they can't see her, and she keeps saying, "Well, I can see you. I can see your lights. Please help." They drive only a few feet away and she says, "I'm right here." They stop the Jeep, unable to see anything. She says, "There, I can see you. Can you see my hand?" And the call cuts off. And that's when they contacted the police.
It's a man who can slap but can also stroke. Going in the wind as an the other that is.
So apparently this surveillance footage captured two crimes at once. The first crime being a kidnapping. The second is committed by this lady who spilled a gallon of organs or blood. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
This story, every time I hear it, gives me the chills, so I want to share it with you too. So this guy says that when he was in school, there was a couple that lived in the same neighborhood and they had a son, and unfortunately their son passed away while he was at school. He says that the lady, the one that lost her son, she was always so nice and everybody knew her in the neighborhood, but after that happened, he hadn't gone over to her house. He does claim that his mom had gone over and the mom would tell him, "Look, if you ever see her, she might say that her son is still alive, so just go along with it because you don't want to, put her in distress again." So apparently the mom had gone over to the house just to give them her condolences, and the mom was like, "Oh, he's still here, he's not gone," and that there were altars and that she would be talking to her son in a picture frame, and that basically his bedroom, nothing had moved. To the lady, that her son was still there. So time has passed and the mom came to her son and she's like, "Hey, you haven't seen her in such a long time, like we should go take her something to eat and just visit for a little bit. He agrees, and of course he remembers, like, if she says he's still here, so we, let's not say anything about that. He says that when he got there, for some reason, he felt such a negative vibe. And he said that was weird because when they went in there, they were all having conversation. The lady was talking to his mom, and she was like, oh yeah, he's still here, like my son is still here. He noticed that they were adding a plate at the table for the son too. So of course he didn't tell her no he's not, because like what the fuck, right? So the lady goes to get something from the kitchen, and him and his mom were in the living room, and from the living room you could see the hallway that leads to the bedrooms in that lady's home. And him and his mom, they swear that they saw a shadow of like a little boy move in that hallway, to the point where they looked at each other and they're like, what the fuck, like I thought she was here alone. In that moment, the mom, the one that lives there, comes out of the kitchen, and immediately his mom says, is there anybody else here with you? And the lady is like, no, well, just my son. What the fuck? And obviously they didn't want to be like, no the fuck he's not. So the mom and him just look at each other, and the lady continues. She's like, yeah, he's always with me. Like he never leaves me alone. He's always going with me everywhere. He said that in the moment he just wished he could just run out the door, but they didn't, just out of respect for her. But they knew that she was home alone because her husband was at work. And that's not even the end of it. He claims that there was another occurrence where the mom and his brother went to this lady's home, and that his brother also saw it. The guy says that he doesn't believe that that's that lady's son because of how heavy the energy is in that home. He feels like she's giving the energy to something that's pretending to be her son. He said that the last time he had gone over, because there was another time he went over to visit her, it got to the point where that house is starting to smell really weird. Like nothing like, spoiled food, or it was just a distinct kind of smell that you just know there's something not right there.
Babe? What are you looking at? Wait, what do you look? Oh my gosh. Do you not see that? Oh my gosh. Rewatch this video. Do you not see that right there? Oh my gosh.
Поздним вечером я вышел из подъезда. Кончились сигареты, а ночь длинная. На дворе стоял разгар января, и январь был великолепен. Частые метели, легкий морозец. Вот и сейчас мело. И мело прилично. Видимости было метров на 10. Пока добрел до ближайшей круглосуточной палатки, оказался весь облеплен белыми мухами. Приобретя искомое, я бодро зашагал обратно. Идти-то всего минут 7, 2 двора протоптать. Дышалось легко, пар валил изо рта, свежий морозный воздух щипал нос. Снег бодро хрустел под подошвами. Улица опустела, и оказался наедине с этой зимней сказкой. Оставалось пройти один двор, когда я заметил его. Прямо напротив меня стояла темная фигура. Нас разделяла узенькая тропинка, пересекавшая двор по диагонали. И мне не хотелось сворачивать, хотя некоторая опаска все же зашевелилась внутри. Я бодрым шагом двинул вперед, снег все мел, но сквозь его пелену мне удалось рассмотреть мужчину, неподвижно стоящего прямо посредине тропы. На нем было осенне-черное пальто, черные же брюки. Он стоял, понурив непокрытую голову и опустив плечи. Руки плетьми свисали до колен. Мне стало не по себе, но я решил, что человек, скорее всего, пьян или находится под действием наркотиков. Вот его и накрыло в пути. Не сбавляя темпа, я приближался к нему, машинально считая сокращавшиеся между нами метры. 5, 4, 3, 2. Ну вот, наконец я поравнялся со странным типом и уже собирался навсегда оставить его позади. Почувствовал, что его рука ловко и цепко ухватила меня за локоть. Тонкие пальцы больно впились в кожу. Даже сквозь пальто я чувствовал их леденящий холод. Я испугался до холодного пота, не скрою. Человек стоял, все так же опустив голову. Его кулак сжимал мой локоть. Почувствовав, что начинаю покрываться мурашками, я рванул руку вверх. Его рука взлетела следом, но хватки не ослабила. Что все это значит? Но вот мужчина все же, кажется, пришел в себя, потому что вздрогнул всем телом и начал медленно поднимать голову. Я стоял, не зная, что думать. Может, у него приступ какой, помощь требуется? Хотя, с такой хваткой. Алкоголик? Будет мелочь стрелять? Тогда почему сразу не спросил на подходе? Наркоман хочет денег на дозу из меня выбить? Ну пусть попробует. Все эти мысли калейдоскопом пронеслись в голове, пока человек с истинно королевской неторопливостью поднимал голову и попутно разворачивал ко мне корпус. Но я уже успел заметить, что кожа на руке у мужчины совсем бледная, даже серая, сухая и потрескавшаяся. И не только это заставило меня струхнуть. Только сейчас я заметил, что он не выдыхает пар. Вот тут мне стало нехорошо, я попытался вырвать руку еще раз, и тут он поднял голову. Я сглотнул. Да, выглядел он неважно. На меня уставилось серое лицо, покрытое синюшными пятнами. На нем, изможденным и остроносом, со впалыми щеками, горели ввалившиеся черные глаза.